25 years. That's how long fans have waited to hear Marvel Studios say the words, "Our X-Men." Through the Fox era, through the merger, through 7 years of the MCU teasing mutants without ever delivering them. And last night, at D23, it finally happened. Kevin Feige walked out, and one by one, the first McHugh X-Men stepped onto that stage, a cast full of genuine shocks, a teenage romance star as Cyclops, a Broadway actress who has never been in a movie as Storm, a complete unknown who became a horror icon this year as Rogue. But the biggest moment of the night wasn't anyone on that stage. It was a video, a panel-crashing surprise message from an Oscar nominee who introduced himself using a name that sounds completely harmless, unless you've read the comics. Because that name told every comic fan in the room exactly what this movie is really about. And I'm saving that reveal for the end, because trust me, it recontextualizes this entire cast list. Let's go through every single casting, who they are, how they got here, and the story Marvel is quietly telling us. First, 30 seconds of context, because the weight itself is part of this story. Marvel announced an McHugh X-Men movie all the way back in 2019, right after the Disney-Fox merger finally brought the mutants home. And then, silence. Years of it. It wasn't until 2023 that Feige even started taking pitches from writers. In 2024, Michael Leslie, the writer behind The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, was announced as the sole screenwriter. And then Marvel handed the director's chair to Jake Schreier, fresh off Thunderbolts. So this project moved slowly, deliberately, quietly, while the internet filled the silence with rumors. Denzel Washington, Charles Melton, Kaylee Spaney, a rotating carousel of Professor X candidates, even a Beast actor who reportedly walked away during final negotiations. For months, nobody knew what was real. Last night, the guessing ended, and the first name confirmed was the one we technically already knew, but hearing her finally say it out loud still hit different. Sadie Sink walked out first, and her opening line said everything. It is so wonderful to be here, and to finally be able to talk about this character after months of speculation. Months is generous. Try 16. Her casting leaked all the way back before Brand New Day even filmed, and Marvel spent over a year refusing to confirm what every fan already believed. Then Spider-Man Brand New Day released 2 weeks ago, and there she was, Jean Grey. The psychic force the government couldn't see revealed 70 minutes into a Spider-Man movie, ending her arc on a bus headed toward Westchester, toward Xavier's school. Think about how unprecedented that rollout is. Marvel didn't announce their new X-Men lead at a press conference. They smuggled her into the biggest movie of the year, let $2 billion worth of audience meet her organically, and only then put her on a stage. If you watched our Jean Grey breakdown, you know why they built the entire launch around her. Jean is the most powerful, most tragic figure in X-Men history, the future Phoenix. Marvel isn't starting the X-Men with a team. They're starting with a time bomb. And standing next to her on that stage, the boy who'll one day lead the team. And his casting journey is genuinely one of the most charming stories in this whole announcement. Kit Connor as Scott Summers, Cyclops. Now, if you know Kit Connor from Heartstopper, the sweet, gentle Netflix romance that made him a global name, this casting might sound soft to you. Here's why it isn't. Between Heartstopper and now, Connor did something very deliberate. He went and made Warfare, a brutal, intense military film, specifically proving he could carry physical, disciplined, hard-edged material. The Hollywood Reporter broke his casting in early August, and the trades noted exactly that trajectory. This is an actor who spent 2 years quietly building the resume for this exact job. And honestly, that arc is Cyclops. Scott Summers is the most underestimated character in X-Men history, dismissed as the boring Boy Scout, when in the comics he's the tightly wound, endlessly burdened field general who holds the entire mutant race together while everyone calls him stiff. An actor the internet underestimates, playing the hero the fandom underestimates. That's not miscasting, that's poetry. But every Cyclops needs a mentor, and Marvel's choice for Professor X broke every single prediction. Christopher Abbott as Professor Charles Xavier. Nobody had this. The rumor mill spent months cycling through prestige names, older, established, safe choices in the Patrick Stewart mold, and Marvel went with a 40-year-old indie film and Broadway actor best known for intense, complicated, morally messy characters. And that choice tells you everything about the timeline. This is not the serene, silver-haired headmaster. Casting Abbott means we're getting a younger Xavier, a man still becoming the professor, with all the arrogance, idealism, and ethical gray zones the comics gave young Charles. Remember, in the comics, Xavier's history is genuinely dark. The secrets, the manipulations, the mind wipes. You don't hire an actor famous for unsettling, layered performances to play a saint. Marvel isn't casting the Xavier we know. They're casting the Xavier who has to earn it. And opposite him, in what might be the most fan-demanded casting of the decade, the White Queen, Samara Weaving as Emma Frost. This one, the fans basically willed into existence. For years, every Emma Frost fan cast had Samara Weaving at the top. The icy poise, the razor comic timing, the ability to be glamorous and terrifying in the same breath. She proved all of it in Ready or Not, fighting through a mansion of murderous aristocrats in a wedding dress. Deadline and Variety broke her casting in July, and the reaction wasn't shock. It was finally. And Emma's presence in this roster matters enormously. She's not a classic first-lineup X-Man. She's the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, a telepath whose entire comic history is tangled in manipulation, corruption, and Jean Grey. If you watched our Jean Grey video, you know the Hellfire Club's psychic games are what pushed Phoenix into Dark Phoenix. Marvel putting Emma Frost in the very first movie, next to Sadie Sink's Jean? That's not a casting choice. That's a warning shot. And then came the two castings nobody, and I mean nobody, predicted. Inde Navarrete as Rogue. If you're asking who, that's the point, and it's the best story of the night. 12 months ago, Navarrete was a working actress few people could name. Then she starred in Obsession, this year's breakout horror hit, and became an overnight genre icon. Months later, she's an X-Man. From unknown, to horror star, to the MCU, in under a year. That is the fastest rise in recent Marvel history, and for Rogue, the Southern powerhouse who steals powers with a touch and carries one of the most beloved, tragic arcs in the franchise, Marvel clearly wanted raw, hungry, undeniable talent over a famous name. And then Maya Boyd as Storm, the single biggest gamble on the entire slate. Boyd is a Broadway actress. She has never starred in a feature film, not one. And Marvel just handed her Ororo Munroe, the weather goddess, the future queen, arguably the most iconic black superheroine ever created, a role previously worn by Halle Berry. Insane? Maybe. But remember, Marvel has made this exact bet before. They handed Spider-Man to a 19-year-old dancer from London most of the world had never heard of. That worked out okay. Boyd being the biggest surprise of the bunch, as one outlet put it, going from Broadway to the biggest franchise on Earth in a single announcement. If she delivers, this becomes legend. 6 heroes, a roster built on rising stars and calculated risks. And then the lights dimmed for one more reveal. A video began to play, and Adam Driver's face filled the screen. Adam Driver, the 2-time Oscar nominee the fandom has chased for a decade. He was famously circled for Reed Richards, rumored for half the roles in Marvel. It never happened. And now here he was, finally joining the MCU, introducing his character with a name so ordinary it almost slid past, Nathaniel Milbury. And every comic reader watching felt their stomach drop. Because Nathaniel Milbury isn't an ordinary name, it's an alias. In the comics, it belongs to Nathaniel Essex, a Victorian-era geneticist obsessed with mutation, granted immortality, who has spent over a century experimenting on mutant DNA, cloning, breeding, and breaking mutant kind from the shadows. You know him by his other name, Mr. Sinister. Adam Driver is playing Mr. Sinister, the single most dangerous scientist in X-Men history. And here's why that reveal reframes everything. Look at what the MCU just built across 2 months. Brand New Day gave us a universal inhibitor that switches off powered DNA, handed to a government agency that experiments on mutants. Doomsday is waking up an army of Sentinels. And now the first X-Men movie's villain is the geneticist, the man whose entire existence is the violation of mutant DNA. No Magneto, no Brotherhood. The MCU's mutant era isn't opening with a war of ideologies. It's opening with experimentation, bodies on tables, DNA in vials. The exact nightmare our inhibitor video warned about, now with an Oscar nominee's face. So step back and read this cast list like a story, because that's what it is. A time bomb telepath who's already on screen, an underestimated leader, a morally gray young Xavier, the White Queen standing suspiciously close to the future Phoenix, two unknowns with everything to prove, and a genetic vampire in the shadows, played by one of the best actors alive, directed by the Thunderbolts guy, written by a Hunger Games writer, arriving May 5th, 2028, after Secret Wars resets the board. 25 years of waiting, and Marvel didn't just cast a team, they cast a thesis. The mutant era will be intimate, dangerous, and built on the fear of what's inside your own DNA. The road there runs straight through Avengers Doomsday this December. Sentinels, incursions, and all. We're covering every step, the castings, the theories, the deep dives on every one of these characters. So subscribe and hit the bell, because the Mutant Saga just officially began. And tell me in the comments, which casting shocked you most? I already know half of you are typing Storm has never been in a movie. See you in the next one.